The bride is back. Kill Bill Volume 2. Now welcome back to my Quentin Tarantino marathon. If you're new to this channel, I'm currently reviewing every single Quentin Tarantino movie leading up to The Hateful Eight, which will premiere this winter. So let's do this. A word of warning to all you guys. Unlike most of my reviews, this one will definitely contain some spoilers, so you have been warned. Kill Bill Volume 2 stars Uma Thurman, David Carradine, Michael Madsen, Daryl Hannah, and many, many more. The film is not really a sequel because I consider the whole damn thing one gigantic film, but more or less a completion of the Kill Bill saga. And the film mainly focuses on the continuing revenge of Kiddo and the final three names on her death list. These are Bud, who's Bill's brother, Elle Driver, who hates Kiddo personally, and of course Bill himself. Now, when reviewing classics, I normally go back and watch them beforehand again. And I'm so glad I did that with Kill Bill Volume 2. Because from the get-go, I was again in love with that film. As I said in my Kill Bill Volume 1 review, that film mainly was an homage to martial arts flicks or Hong Kong cinema. But only had like tiny little elements of spaghetti western in it as well. Kill Bill Volume 2, on the other hand, is an homage to spaghetti westerns and with tiny elements of martial arts and Hong Kong cinema in it. And again, I'm amazed how well it works. The very first chapter of this film shows the lead up to the massacre. It's all in black and white and we finally get to meet Bill. And it's very clever that they reveal Bill in the very first chapter. He was a ghost, he was a mystery throughout the very first film. You only ever saw his hand or his boot, you heard his voice, and now you finally meet him and you're like, wow, that might be one of Quentin Tarantino's best original characters ever. Seriously, you look at the guy and you're like, he's cool, he's well spoken, but he's also really emotional because you kind of get to see his perspective in this film. You're like, yeah, he is heartbroken. And the dialogue between him and Uma Thurman in the first chapter at the wedding chapel, which is a funny thing. We learn it wasn't actually a wedding, it was a wedding rehearsal. It's brilliantly written. It's one of my favorite Tarantino intros ever. From the get-go, you're like, okay, we flesh out Uma Thurman's character a little bit more by giving her Bill, by portraying their chemistry, by revealing that these people used to be deeply in love and he's heartbroken over what she did to him. That's awesome. And yeah, we also meet the different characters on her death list. First of all, Bud. It's very interesting to see this guy because essentially he's a loser. He's the one that is no longer a badass warrior. No, he's a bouncer at a strip club. And he's the only one that's sort of like, yep, we all deserve to die. That woman deserves her revenge, but then again, she also deserves to die. And I love the sequence where he buries her alive and she has to punch herself out of the coffin. That is brilliant. And that makes for another amazing sequence, and that is a flashback. In a flashback that completely removes all spaghetti western-ish themes of the film and dives into Far Eastern martial art flicks. We learn how she became so badass. She actually had a master who was called Pei Mei. And here's a little fun fact for you. The guy that actually plays Pei Mei is the same dude that played the leader of the Crazy 88 in the first one. And I'm telling you, the cinematography, the huge close-ups, the zoom-ins, you might think it's cheesy and stupid, but again, it works so well because they adapted everything from that specific genre. Not only the cinematography, but the soundtrack, all of it, it works. Which leads to the second big confrontation of this film, which is the bride against Elle. And that fight is really brutal. It's nothing like the battle against Oren Ishii in the first one. No, this time around, it's just brutal. Tarantino specifically said he did not make use of any soundtrack or theme song during that fight because he wanted the roughness be the soundtrack of that scene. The audience going, oh, ooh, that's the soundtrack of that scene. And again, it works. A lot of people were expecting this big, huge, epic fight between Bill and Uma Thurman at the end. And I'm so glad that that was not the case. Because as we all learned at the end of Kill Bill Volume 1, Kiddo's daughter is in fact alive. So when Uma Thurman storms Bill's place in order to kill him, the first person she runs into is actually her daughter. And that to me turns the entire thing on its head, because now you're like, oh, this story is essentially about a dysfunctional family. And I cannot tell you how great the final confrontation between Bill and Uma Thurman is. Because it is essentially a 45-minute dialogue. But it's so intense, it's so funny, it makes use of pop culture references. I mean, who will ever forget the genius Superman monologue that Bill gives in this film? But the actual fight is like 20 seconds long. And it's another thing, once the bride fatally wounds Bill and he's about to die, you're like, man, Bill's gonna die. That's sad. You actually feel for him and you feel for her because she's also sad. I mean, yes, she took an oath of revenge and she promised that she would kill every single one who was responsible for what happened at the wedding chapel. But you can see it in her eyes. She's crying. She is not happy that he's dying. They actually have a heartfelt goodbye. I love it so much. And I'd love to point out that Gordon Liu is not the only one who returns in this movie playing a different character. No, Michael Parks is in this movie as well, but he's not playing the sheriff anymore. He plays this pimp who used to be a surrogate father for Bill. And that guy is talented. I mean, seriously. If there's one thing that I do not like about the movie, it's actually the TV version. Because this movie has two beautiful end credit sequences where you're like, oh, this is awesome. The music, all the characters, we get to see them again, we get to see their names on the big screen, and we get to see Kiddo laughing and driving off to the sunset with her daughter. I believe that we, the audience, deserve that because that actually makes it a conclusion. But that's not a negative to the movie. That's a negative to the people who cut it out for the TV version. All in all, what can I say? This movie is much more emotional than I thought it would be. It has even better dialogue than the first one. It switches the tone once again because this time around, I told you, it's more of a spaghetti western. We finally get to meet Bill and the tease was worth it because Bill is a phenomenal character. And we get to witness the bloody climax of The Bride's Revenge. Kill Bill Volume 2 definitely gets the gold medal. So the Kill Bill saga has been officially reviewed. Next up, Death Proof. Thank you guys, as always, for watching. And if you like what you see here and you want to see more, then just subscribe.